One doesn't have to have pyramids the size they are. They could be smaller. The Parthenon could be built at ground level. There's an advantage in the large stones at Stonehenge. They're a permanent record. They don't shift around. And we know that the megalithic people just thought big. For some reason, they were obsessed with the idea of setting up these huge megaliths all over the place. And perhaps when they'd finished, they felt that they'd erected something which was there for all men to see.
Alexander Thom, Professor Emeritus, Engineering Sciences, Oxford University.
These people were much further developed intellectually than is generally recognized. Witness their geometry. These people have left in stone about a dozen ellipses set out on the hillsides and moorlands of Britain. It is generally considered that the ellipse came in with the Greeks, but we have these people showing a knowledge of the ellipse 1,000 years earlier.
Stuart Piggott, Professor of Prehistory, University of Edinburgh.
Just how barbarian is a barbarian? We mustn't, for instance, as I'm afraid an awful lot of people do, think of them as those awful bearded, skin-clad monsters emerging from their caves and shambling about the landscape, which for so many people constitute the whole of prehistoric man. That may be all right for the early phases of, very early phases of prehistoric man, but such people, their cultures were long ago extinct for many thousands of years by the time we are talking about. And we're dealing with chaps and girls who were as handsome as you and me, and indistinguishable from us if they were dressed up in the appropriate clothes.
Dr. Frank George, University of Bristol, computer expert.
My own feeling is that Stonehenge is undeniably a computer in the sense that it could be used as such. I think Professor Hawkins's case is absolutely clear here. You could regard Stonehenge as a way of making predictions of an astronomical kind. The whole question, of course, really is whether it was designed as such. This is much more difficult to answer, and this remains the $64 question, if you like. But one thing I think we must be absolutely clear about, when we use a word like computer in this context, we don't mean a huge electronic digital system which are used all over the world today. We mean a simple counting device, and this could be done by collecting matchsticks. It could be done by making marks on rock or anything you like. It could even be done, in fact, by making holes in a circle, as they may have done at Stonehenge. Furthermore, it's almost too much of a coincidence to believe that 56 happened by accident.
In fact, the sun doesn't rise over the heel stone now, and it never did. By the time the lower part of the sun passes over the heel stone at sunrise on Midsummer Day, it's already well clear of the stone. And this was even more so when Stonehenge was built, because in those days the sun rose rather to the west of its present position. So the lining up is not at all accurate. And in fact, the sun won't rise directly over the heel stone until the year 3260 AD. So I think this is all rather problematical.
The sun does rise over the heel stone. My calculations with this computer show that at midsummer it stands on the peak of the heel stone. And if I'm right about that one calculation, then all the other 24 alignments are also correct. And if these alignments are correct, then my opinion about Stonehenge as a computer is confirmed.
Midsummer 1964. In most places, that means blue skies. At Stonehenge, the forecast is fog. It was cold and damp as we set up our cameras to try to capture the visual evidence that could confirm Professor Hawkins's theory. Up to now, that theory existed only on paper. Dr. Hawkins told us that one picture of the sunrise was all he needed to prove his calculations once and for all. It's a rare morning on Salisbury Plain when the rising sun is not hidden in mist. If it is hidden this morning, Professor Hawkins's theory remains only a theory. But if the sun is visible rising over the heel stone, the 24 alignments keyed to it will each fall into place. If the sun is not visible or is wide of the heel stone, the alignments are meaningless figures on paper. This experiment was filmed exactly as it took place. Our cameras are set to precise specifications, dead center on the Stonehenge axis. We filmed the slow, inexorable path of the sun from where those ancient observers would have stood. And thus, we are now part of a countdown that began 4,000 years ago. Stonehenge man stood here then, tense, expectant, waiting for a god that brought warmth and fertility and life. Now we wait for a door to the past to open, for a fresh insight into the mind of prehistoric man. The sun does rise over the heelstone. Folklore is now fact. Tradition is translated into science, and for the first time documented on motion picture film. Based on this experiment, Dr. Hawkins has discovered that his calculations were exact to within 1/10 of a degree. There seems little doubt that Stonehenge was an observatory. Professor Atkinson, while still questioning the idea that Stonehenge was used as a computer to predict eclipses, does credit Hawkins with a new and valuable scientific contribution. Even Dr. Hawkins would agree that we do not yet know the full story. And the search for Stonehenge truth continues. Professor Atkinson plans new excavations in the area around Stonehenge. Professor Hawkins is investigating a stone circle in Scotland and has found sun and moon alignments and rows of stones there that could be used as a counting system. Today, Stonehenge, computer, observatory, call it what you will, is operating on schedule, season in, season out.